The key didn't fit. Loretta Mae Johnson blinked at the brass doorknob she'd turned 1,000 times before. The grooves on her fingers knew that lock better than most people. But now it pushed back. She tried again, slow, then firm, until the truth settled in her chest like cold iron. The lock had been changed. Still in her house slippers, arms full with a warm rotisserie chicken, she knocked. Once, twice, a pause. Then the door cracked open. Amber. That girl didn't even flinch. Oh, you weren't supposed to be back until later. Loretta blinked. Why can't I get in the house? Amber looked over her shoulder like she expected backup. I think Lucas was going to talk to you about that. About what? You don't live here anymore. Loretta froze. Same cardigan. Same porch. Same house she'd paid off in full. And now? She was a stranger on her own steps. Evicted by the boy she raised like her own. But what Lucas didn't know was that Loretta had one last card to play, and it was worth $8.2 million. The screen door closed with a soft thud, but it may as well have been a slam in Loretta's face. For a long time, she didn't move. The grocery bag dug into her forearm, beans, bread, and a rotisserie chicken she'd picked up on sale. Still warm. Still hers. But the house? Not anymore. She stood there in her soft blue cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender, blinking at the door like it might blink back. But it didn't. It stayed shut, firm, final. 22 years. She'd lived in that house through lightning storms and hot Alabama summers. She'd painted every baseboard, scrubbed every window pane, rocked her sick husband to sleep through his last nights in that back bedroom. And now, she wasn't even allowed to step inside. She sat down on the porch steps. Slowly, carefully. Her knees ached from standing too long, but her hands were steady. Too steady. That was the part that scared her. She wanted to cry. She expected to cry. But she didn't. Instead, she just stared at the chipped paint on the porch railing, at the flower beds she'd planted with Lucas when he was 5. Marigolds. He used to say they smelled like cheese. And now? He wasn't even home to face her himself. Sent his girlfriend instead. That slick, tight-smiling girl who always looked like she was waiting for someone more important to arrive. Amber had spoken with the confidence of someone who thought kindness was optional, who'd never held a baby through a fevered night or scrubbed mold out of bathroom tile just to make ends meet. Loretta took a breath, then another, and slowly stood up. She didn't knock again. She didn't call anyone. She just walked, chicken under her arm like a child, head held high, down the steps of the house she once called home. Long before locks changed and porches turned cold, Loretta Mae Johnson was a nurse in Montgomery. Third shift, St. Agnes Medical Center. The kind of place where the lights buzzed just a little too loud, and the coffee in the break room could strip paint off a Buick. She was 37, single, and had stopped waiting on motherhood. 2 miscarriages. 1 round of IVF that drained her savings and her hope. After that, she folded away the baby clothes she'd bought on impulse and told God, I'll love who you send me, even if it ain't a child. One rainy Thursday, just after 3 a.m., the ER door slid open with a shiver of wind. In came a woman holding a toddler like he was a sack of groceries. Careless, hurried. His wrist was swollen and purple. Loretta stepped forward, arms already out, as the woman handed the child off without a glance. He fell, she muttered. He's foster care. Y'all handle it. And then she was gone. The boy didn't cry, didn't speak, just looked up at Loretta with hollow eyes and a snot-streaked cheek. He wore a t-shirt 3 sizes too big with a faded cartoon dinosaur and mustard stains on the collar. His name, the intake form said, was Lucas. No middle name, just Lucas. He wouldn't eat unless Loretta fed him, wouldn't sleep unless he was in the chair beside her station, clutching the edge of her scrub top like it was a life vest. He didn't say much, just clung to her like vines to brick. There was a sadness to him, something too old for a boy barely 2. Loretta didn't plan to adopt. She wasn't looking for a son. But sometimes, God doesn't knock. He just lays a child in your arms and dares you to put him down. Over the next 2 weeks, she kept showing up early, staying late, asking questions. Has he been placed yet? What's the timeline? Can I take him for walks outside? No one stopped her. In truth, no one else really noticed. By the end of the month, Loretta had filled out the initial paperwork. By the end of 6 months, his name changed, Lucas Johnson. Her friends thought she was out of her mind. A single black woman in Alabama, raising a white boy with behavioral problems? Girl, they'd say. You trying to fix the whole system? And she'd laugh and answer, no, just this one. It wasn't easy. Lucas had night terrors. Asthma. He bit other kids in daycare and refused to eat green foods. But Loretta didn't flinch. She found the best pediatrician in the county, taught him to breathe slow through a paper bag during flare-ups. She packed peanut butter sandwiches with the crusts cut off, braided his hair on picture day when he insisted on looking fancy, and read the same bedtime story until her voice cracked. She taught him piano when his hands got restless, paid for swimming lessons even though the nearest pool was 40 minutes away. She had no family nearby, no partner to share the load, but she made that house a world where Lucas felt safe. And for a while, that was enough. Still, the world outside didn't understand. People stared at the grocery store, whispered at church, "Is he yours? Are you the nanny? He looks different." Loretta never answered with anger. Just a calm smile and a simple truth, "He's mine." But as Lucas got older, he stopped answering that question the same way. In middle school, he began to ask, "Why don't I look like you? Why do people stare? Why does everyone think I'm adopted?" And she'd tell him gently, "Because you are. But that doesn't mean you're not mine." Somewhere between teenage years and graduation, that answer stopped being enough. By high school, Lucas stopped calling her mama in front of friends. It started small. Eye rolls when she kissed his cheek at drop-off, complaints about her old-school rules. Then came the silence. The dinners where he barely looked up from his phone. The "I'm busy" texts. By senior year, Loretta could count their conversations on one hand. Still, she made his favorite meals on Sunday. She washed his lucky hoodie before every big test. She kept the porch light on, even on nights he didn't come home. Then came college. He got a scholarship to the University of Alabama, a 2-hour drive away. Loretta helped pack his things, neatly folding jeans, labeling his plastic bins, slipping $20 bills between his notebooks. She hugged him tight in the dorm parking lot, whispering, "No matter how far you go, you always got a home." He nodded, said thanks, but didn't look back as he walked into the building. After that, visits were rare. Holidays, mostly. Quick ones. A night. Maybe 2. He'd show up with laundry and half a smile, scrolling his phone through dinner. Loretta never complained. She told herself, that's just how boys are. They grow, they go, but they always find their way back. Then came Amber. The first time Lucas brought her home, Loretta had just taken sweet potato pie out of the oven. Amber barely looked up from her phone. She had that glossy, polished look, like someone who'd practiced smiling in mirrors but never learned to mean it. She wore stilettos on wooden floors and called Loretta Miss Johnson, like she was a secretary. Still, Loretta tried. She offered iced tea, pulled out extra towels, even let Amber pick the TV channel. For a while, it seemed Lucas was warming up again. He helped mow the lawn, changed the batteries in the smoke detectors, reminded Loretta to take her blood pressure pills. They'd sit on the porch, Loretta with her crossword, Lucas and Amber whispering over their phones. She told herself this was healing, that the distance was shrinking. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was that Lucas hadn't come home to reconnect. He came to take inventory. He started asking strange questions. Is the house in your name alone? Do you have a will? What would happen to the property if something ever happened to you? Loretta brushed it off at first. She thought maybe he was just being responsible, growing up, thinking ahead. But something in his tone was off. Too rehearsed. Too careful. Then came the folder. A thick manila envelope he slid across the table one Sunday, while Loretta folded dish towels and the sweet potato pie ticked in the oven behind her. It's just paperwork, Lucas said, smiling like it was no big deal. Helps avoid probate. Totally standard. Amber's firm handles this all the time. Loretta frowned. I didn't ask to avoid anything. That's why we're doing it for you, he said, already uncapping a pen. Just sign the highlighted lines. We'll take care of the rest. She should have asked more questions. She should have said no. But she didn't want to seem paranoid. She didn't want to believe her boy, her baby, would lie to her. So she signed. One page. Then another. Then another. Lucas joked, "You're making history, Mama." She laughed once. Just a puff of air. She didn't know it then, but that was the last time she'd ever sit at that kitchen table. After she signed the papers, things began to shift, quietly at first, like a door easing shut on rusty hinges. Lucas started bringing strangers into the house. Friends from real estate circles, he said. Men in slim suits with firm handshakes and eyes that wandered across her living room like they already owned it. They talked numbers while Loretta stirred grits in the kitchen. They laughed too loudly, always using words like equity, portfolio, and liquidate. She tried to ignore it, told herself it was just his world now, not hers. She watered her begonias, folded laundry, played crossword puzzles with the volume low so she wouldn't interrupt. But it wasn't just the visitors. It was the way Lucas started calling her Loretta in front of Amber, like Mama had become too small for the man he now imagined himself to be. It was the way Amber left her makeup kits in the bathroom, took over the master closet, and rolled her eyes when Loretta asked if they planned to repaint the living room. "This place needs a refresh," she said, walking across the hardwood floors in her heels. "It's got old energy." Loretta smiled through gritted teeth, but her heart cracked a little more each day. One afternoon, while she was trimming dead leaves off her plants, she overheard Amber whispering on the phone, "Once we close on this place, we can finally get that apartment in Dallas." Loretta's hands froze over the soil. That night, she began packing a small bag, just in case. She tucked away her Bible, her passport, and the last photo she had of Walter, the only man who'd ever loved her without conditions. She slid her old nurse's notebook in beside them, the one with her settlement account information. It wasn't much, just the essentials, because something in her bones whispered the ground beneath her feet wasn't hers anymore. Still, Loretta held on. She vacuumed. She cooked. She stayed out of their way. But the air in the house had changed. No more Jeopardy reruns. No more cornbread in the oven. Just silence. Cold and clean. Like a museum no one wanted her walking through. Then came the final blow. It was a Wednesday. The afternoon sun fell through the blinds in narrow gold strips. Loretta had just finished vacuuming the living room, humming a hymn to herself. Dust didn't care about age, she always said, and a clean house was her gospel. Lucas walked in wearing gym shorts and a branded hoodie, earbuds around his neck. Amber followed, mid-call, chattering into her Bluetooth headset. They barely looked at her. Then, as he reached for a bottle of water, Lucas paused. "Oh, next time you use the Dyson," he said casually, "make sure to empty it out. We've got people coming to see the place this weekend." Loretta blinked. "People?" He shrugged. "Realtors. Just getting a feel for the value, you know? Market research." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You selling the house?" He laughed. Not cruelly, just dismissively. Like the idea was so obvious it didn't need confirmation. "Not yet. Just looking at options. Gotta think ahead." She straightened up. "Options?" That's when he said it. "You're a guest now, Mama. It's still your space, of course, but legally, well, you know how it is." She didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't throw the vacuum. She simply nodded once, like someone finally admitting a long, bitter truth to herself. That night, she packed for real. 2 dresses, a pair of sneakers, her Bible, her notebook, and Walter's wedding band, the one she hadn't worn in 3 years, but still kept tucked inside a velvet pouch on her bedside table. Lucas didn't ask where she was going. Amber didn't even say goodbye. They thought they had everything. But they didn't know. Loretta still had something they couldn't take. The motel sat across from a flickering gas station and a shuttered diner that hadn't served pie in years. It wasn't much. The wallpaper peeled at the edges. The heater wheezed like an old man trying to catch his breath. But it was quiet. And for the first time in days, it was hers. Loretta checked in under her maiden name, Loretta May Freeman, and paid cash for 2 nights. No questions asked. The clerk didn't even blink. Just handed her a key card and pointed toward a row of rooms that all looked the same. Tired, low, and forgettable. She didn't cry when she unlocked the door. Didn't cry when she placed her Bible on the nightstand. Didn't cry when she pulled the covers back and saw the cheap polyester sheet pilled with age. But when she sat down at the desk, opened her old nurse's notebook, and saw the folded paper inside, that's when her hands trembled. Just slightly. Like the aftershock of something she hadn't named yet. It had been almost 2 years since Walter died. A blood clot. Misdiagnosis. The hospital called it a complication. Loretta called it what it was, negligence. She'd seen the signs, felt them in his skin. But when she spoke up, the doctors brushed her off like lint. So she fought back. Not loudly. Not with protests or news cameras. But with documentation. Copies. Letters. Dates. Names. And when the hospital offered her a quiet settlement, $8.2 million, she took it. Not out of greed, but out of survival. She split it into accounts, moved it under her maiden name, and told no one. Not even Lucas. Because money changes people. And love, real love, shouldn't come with a dollar sign attached. Now, sitting in that creaky motel chair with a styrofoam cup of lukewarm tea, she finally whispered the number aloud. Just once. Like it might vanish if she said it too often. 8.2 million, she murmured. Lucas had taken her house. Her dignity. But he didn't know. He'd only ever stolen shadows. The real fire was still hers. She flipped to the back of the notebook. There it was, a note she'd written on the day the wire transfer cleared. Don't let money make you loud. Let it make you quiet. Let it buy you time. Loretta smiled. A soft, sad smile. The kind you give yourself when the world thinks you've been beaten, but you know different. Lucas hadn't won. He'd simply started the clock. That night, she didn't sleep much. The room buzzed with the hum of old wiring and faraway truck engines. But her mind was clear, sharper than it had been in months. She wrote down everything she could remember. The day she signed the papers, what Lucas said, how Amber smiled like she'd just won something. She noted the dates, the odd phrases, avoiding probate, family protection, nothing serious. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because Loretta May Freeman might have lost her front porch, but she hadn't lost her footing. In the morning, she opened her flip phone and stared at the list of contacts. Most names were outdated. Friends who'd passed. Family who had drifted. But one stood out like a thread pulled tight from memory. Franklin Pierce, retired attorney. Friend of Walter's. Once helped her with a tenant who sued over a broken pipe in a rental unit. He hadn't practiced in years, but Loretta remembered one thing about Franklin. He hated bullies, especially ones in neckties. She dialed his number. It rang 5 times. Then a voice answered, raspy and half asleep. This better be Jesus or a damn emergency. Loretta smiled. Maybe it's both. Franklin Pierce was the kind of man who looked like he hadn't aged so much as hardened. His beard had gone mostly white, and his limp was a little more pronounced than it used to be, but those eyes, sharp and steady, still held court like a judge who didn't need a gavel. They met at Earl's Diner, just off the Selma bypass. Same chipped booths. Same black coffee strong enough to burn through sin. The waitress called everyone baby, whether you were 5 or 95. Franklin slid into the booth and looked at Loretta with a mix of curiosity and concern. You look like hell, he muttered. She smiled faintly. Good morning to you too. He sipped his coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just like Walter used to. All right, he said, setting the mug down. Tell me everything. No softening. No skipping. Just lay it out. So she did. She told him about the documents. About the way Lucas had smiled while she signed, and the way Amber had never once made eye contact. About the door that wouldn't open, and the words that still echoed in her chest. You don't live here anymore. Franklin didn't interrupt. Just listened, hands folded, eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. He tricked you, he said. Played you like a hymn on Sunday morning. Loretta looked down at her hands, now still on the napkin. I signed it, Franklin. I put my name on every line. He nodded. Yeah, but were you fully informed? Did he explain the legal consequences? Did he tell you what transferring the deed would mean? No, she said. He told me it was just to protect the family. Then we've got something to work with, Franklin replied. If a signature is given under false pretenses, it can be challenged, especially when it involves power of attorney and property transfer without full disclosure. Loretta sighed. I'm not trying to destroy him, Franklin. I just want my home. I want to look at myself in the mirror and not feel like a damn fool. Franklin's expression softened. He reached across the table and touched her hand. Then let's not destroy him. Let's teach him something. They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. Loretta had written much of it down already. Habit of a nurse, document everything. Dates, phrases, tone, even what Amber wore the day she said. Once we close on this place. Franklin laid out the next steps. File a petition to investigate the transfer. Prove Loretta lacked full legal understanding. Show coercion or misrepresentation. Request injunctive relief. Freeze the sale. And then, just before they got up to leave, Loretta said it. I've got money. Franklin paused mid-reach for his hat. You mean a little saved up? No, she said quietly. Real money. From the malpractice settlement. $8.2 million. I never told Lucas. Never told anyone. For the first time that morning, Franklin looked truly stunned. He nearly dropped his hat. You've been sitting on $8 million and letting that boy run you out like you're yesterday's trash. I didn't want money to change the way I loved him, she whispered. Franklin didn't speak right away, just stared at her like he was looking at something sacred that had been bruised. Then, gently, he said, "It didn't. He changed. All on his own." Loretta blinked. The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. She looked out the window. The sun had shifted slightly. The sky over Selma was clean and quiet, but the air felt like it was holding its breath. "I want to do this right," she said. "No press. No revenge. Just my name back on that deed." Franklin nodded. "Then we'll get it. And if I have to roll into that courthouse with a walker and a war cry, I will." Loretta smiled. She didn't need war. She had the truth. And now she had time. Loretta didn't call first. She knew if she did, Lucas would let it go to voicemail. Or worse, send Amber to deal with it like a customer service complaint. So she showed up. Late afternoon. The sky was soft with the beginnings of dusk. The yard looked too neat, like someone had tried too hard to make it perfect. Hedges trimmed, porch swept, not a single leaf out of place. Her begonias were gone, replaced by stiff, soulless landscaping bark. She knocked once. Lucas opened the door wearing gym shorts, a branded hoodie, and holding a protein shake, the kind that said he hadn't had a home-cooked meal in months. His face dropped the moment he saw her. "Ma," he stopped himself. "Loretta, what are you doing here?" She stepped forward just enough that the screen door separated them. She didn't ask to come in. Didn't want to. The porch was still hers in some invisible way, even if the papers said otherwise. "I don't need much of your time," she said. "Just a few words." Lucas glanced over his shoulder, probably checking if Amber was around, or if anyone could overhear. He stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "If this is about the house." She raised a hand. "Let me finish." He shut his mouth. "I raised you when nobody else would," she said, voice calm. "Not because I had to, and not because I was looking for thanks. I did it because I saw a child that needed love, and I gave it every ounce I had." Lucas shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted away, toward the street. "I gave up sleep, time, my body, my youth. Gave you everything I had, and not once did I ever make you feel like a guest in this life." He opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off again, softly, firmly. "You repaid me with a pen and a changed lock." "I didn't force you to sign anything," he mumbled. "You signed, Ma. Don't call me Ma if you don't mean it." Silence fell like dust. She took a breath, then stepped down one stair, eye to eye now. "I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to win. I just came to tell you two things." Lucas crossed his arms. Defensive, embarrassed, maybe even scared. "First," she said, "I know what you did. And second, I'm not broke. Never was." His eyes snapped up. "What?" "I've got enough money to buy this house 10 times over. You just never thought to ask." Lucas's face shifted, disbelief, then panic, then something softer. "Shame, maybe. Or recognition." "I didn't know," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to. I kept it hidden because love ain't a business," she said. "And loyalty, that can't be bought." He opened his mouth again, but the words didn't come. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she added. "This will go where it needs to go. I just wanted to look you in the eye before it does." Lucas looked like he wanted to say something, anything, but he just dropped his gaze to the porch floor. "You're going to sue me?" "No," she said, and her voice was clear now. Resolved. "I'm going to remind you what a real home costs." She turned and walked down the steps. Not with anger, not with pride, but with peace. The kind that comes from knowing the worst had happened, and she was still standing. She didn't look back. Lucas didn't follow. No apologies. No begging. Just silence. But what truly unsettled him wasn't her threat. It was that, for the first time in his life, he saw her not as the woman who raised him, but as the woman he had wildly underestimated. 3 months later, the house was quiet again, but not because Loretta moved back in. Lucas never showed up to the hearing. Amber left town a week before the court date. The judge barely needed an hour to rule. Deed signed under questionable circumstances, without full explanation or consent, particularly toward an elderly party without legal counsel. Fraudulent transfer. Property restored. Just like that, her name was back on the deed. But Loretta didn't smile. She didn't dance, didn't pop champagne. She just stood outside the courthouse in her Sunday shoes and took one deep breath. Slow and steady, like something inside her had been holding its breath and could finally let go. The house sat empty for weeks. Real estate agents called. Neighbors peeked through blinds. But Loretta never returned. Too many ghosts in those walls. She had no interest in repossessing a place that no longer held warmth. Instead, she moved forward, quietly, deliberately, with the kind of purpose that couldn't be bought in a courtroom. She drove 2 hours south to Mobile, where the air was heavy with sea salt and second chances. She bought 3 modest homes in the same neighborhood, nothing grand. Single story, wide porches, rooms that smelled of pine and memory. And she gave them new life. Walter's Haven, she named it, after the man who once called her sunshine, even on her worst days. After the husband who taught her that home wasn't brick, it was the people inside it. Walter's Haven wasn't a shelter. It was a refuge, a place for elderly women who had nowhere else to go. Not just those betrayed or evicted, though some were, but also those forgotten by the world. Widows with no children, mothers whose sons never called back, sisters left behind when nursing homes ran out of space or patience. The first resident was Alma, 74, evicted by her grandson when she couldn't babysit full-time anymore. The second was Darlene, whose daughter sold her house while she was recovering from hip surgery. Then came Miss Eunice, a retired teacher who'd spent 40 years caring for other people's children but had no one left of her own. Loretta didn't ask for stories. She didn't need them. She saw it in their posture, in the way they gripped their purses when they first walked in, as if waiting to be turned away one last time. But she always greeted them the same way. A warm quilt, a pot of collard greens on the stove, and a porch rocker with their name on it. Some nights they sat together and watched game shows. Other nights they shared silence and stories about the ones who hurt them, and the ones they outlived anyway. Loretta never talked about Lucas. She didn't need to. The women saw her truth in how she moved, how she listened, how she never raised her voice, even when she had every reason to. Franklin still visited from time to time, mostly to help with paperwork or to drop off fresh pecan pie from Earl's Diner. He once joked about putting Loretta's face on a billboard. The woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint. She rolled her eyes. "I'm just doing what my mama taught me," she said one afternoon, wiping flour from her hands. "You don't fold when you're cornered. You pray, you plant your feet, and you protect your peace." And that's exactly what Walter's Haven became. A fortress of peace. No cameras, no headlines, just laughter in the kitchen and slippers on the porch. The rhythm at Walter's Haven settled in like a hymn. Breakfast was slow and quiet. Fresh fruit, toast, sometimes grits if Loretta felt generous with butter. The women moved at their own pace. No bells, no schedules, no nurses peeking in every 15 minutes like they were checking expiration dates. Just time. Time to sit, to stretch, to be. Alma crocheted on the porch, hands stiff with arthritis, but steady in spirit. Darlene liked humming old Motown songs while she folded towels. She always said folding calmed her heart. Miss Eunice read the obituaries like devotionals, nodding solemnly at each passing, then whispering a quiet, "Lord, be kind." Loretta did a little bit of everything. She cooked, drove to the pharmacy, paid the bills, repainted cabinets. She wasn't staff. She wasn't management. She was just Loretta. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to perform the role of mother, caretaker, fixer, fighter. She didn't have to be the strong one. She just had to show up. And that, it turned out, was enough. The community around Walter's Haven noticed. Slowly at first. A retired pastor from down the road began dropping off extra vegetables from his garden. A group of teenage girls from the local church came by once a month to paint nails and listen. They called it Grandma Hour, though not all the women were grandmothers. Some had no children. Some had children who never called. But no one asked those questions here. The walls of Walter's Haven weren't built to hold pain. They were built to release it. One evening, after dinner, Darlene asked Loretta why she never hung up family photos. "Don't you have any of your son?" Loretta paused, dish towel in hand. The question wasn't cruel, just curious. She wiped her hands slowly and said, "I did, but now I keep them in a box. Why not out where you can see them?" Loretta looked out the window, where the sun was casting gold across the porch railing. Alma was in her rocker. Miss Eunice was watering the ferns. "Because healing," she said, "don't always need a frame. Sometimes it just needs room. The others didn't press. They understood. Every woman at Walter's Haven carried some kind of fracture. Betrayal. Abandonment. Grief that had no name but sat in the lungs like old smoke. But here, nobody had to explain. Nobody had to perform their pain for it to be real. Loretta's days were full in a quiet way. Once a week, she drove to the library and borrowed books. Large print romances for Darlene, mystery novels for Miss Eunice, and sometimes an old cookbook just to feel Walter's presence again in the rhythm of molasses measurements and cornbread temperatures. She planted tomatoes in the backyard. She led afternoon walks around the block. She bought secondhand cardigans for the women before winter came. And each night, before bed, she opened her notebook and wrote one line. Just one. A ritual she picked up again not out of duty, but because it reminded her she still had stories left to tell, even if no one read them but her. Some entries were simple. Alma laughed so hard at Jeopardy she snorted. Others were heavier. Thought of Lucas when the mail came. Felt nothing. Is that progress? But no matter what she wrote, the ink flowed easier now. Not forced. Not bleeding. Just honest. And that, too, was healing. One Sunday afternoon, Loretta stood on the back porch with a cup of tea. The women were inside playing bingo with cheap prizes and loud joy. The sun was warm. The breeze soft. The laughter drifting through the screen door was light and alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. She wasn't watching her words or measuring her worth in someone else's approval. She was home. No title deed. No signature. No paper. Just a porch, some peace, and the quiet knowledge that even the most broken things can grow again. 1 year later, Loretta sat on the back porch of Walter's Haven with a cup of tea and a soft fleece blanket across her lap. The sky over Mobile was stitched with orange and gold, the kind of sunset that made silence feel like a hymn. Inside, Darlene was humming while she cleaned collard greens. Miss Eunice was dozing off to a gospel record, and Alma's soft laughter drifted from the front room like a lullaby from another life. In Loretta's hand was a letter, folded once. No return address, just her name, written in a familiar, now distant, hand. She'd already read it. She didn't need to read it again. Instead, she slipped it into the back of her Bible, closed it gently, and laid it beside her. Some things don't need to be forgiven to be finished, and some chapters don't need a period, just peace. She took a breath, the kind that fills more than lungs. Then she looked up at the sky, smiled softly, and whispered, "Let them take the house. I built a home. If this moment stirred something in you, another story just like it is waiting here. Let's keep going. Comment one word that stays with you tonight. Worth. And if you believe real strength is quiet, come walk this road with us. These stories are for you."